My last name is Guy. I was Sarah Gaffney when I joined up. And I often ask myself why I joined. I think I was patriotic because my father was a World War I veteran, but it wasn't entirely that. I think I wanted to be part of what was really a big adventure in World War II. And I wanted to be a part of that. And I saw a recruiting movie that showed they would train you as a medic, and that appealed to me.
Were you trained as a medic?
Yes, I was. I went to El Paso, Beaumont Hospital in El Paso, and I was trained. Of course, you just have a basic training, and then you do most on-the-job training after that. And that was one of my first assignments, was working with POWs coming out of the German camps.
And where were you stationed?
I was stationed in Florida. They had Coral Gables. It was a hotel that they had turned into a hospital for mostly returning POWs. Yeah, it was so totally new, because even though you read about these things, until you actually meet men in situations like that, especially coming out of POW camps, you can't imagine it. And it was a beautiful experience, because they were grateful for practically anything you did for them. And of course, they were so easy to work with. And we worked in physical therapy, trying to massage and just doing general rehab. And you saw people who were, maybe men 6 feet tall, weighing maybe 110 or something. And so the idea was to build them up and help them along mentally too.
Very rewarding.
Yes, it was really. It really was.
Did you hear any of their stories of how they were captured?
No, actually, very little, because they didn't want to talk about it. And I think they were very, very close about it. And I found that was true wherever I met people who had been in service and had been, men, I mean, who had been in combat. It's something they simply will not talk about unless they're among themselves talking about it. So you never asked questions about it, and you just listened when they did talk, but that would be seldom, really, you know. I had, when I was working in a hospital in Boston as a volunteer, and I really liked that. I loved being with people and doing that sort of thing. I should have gone into nursing, but I don't think we could afford it, and I thought maybe this way I could get into that field.
Did it meet your expectations?
Oh, definitely. The whole experience was absolutely wonderful. Probably one of the best things I ever did for myself.
What were some of the best moments for you?
Well, I think that was one of the warmest moments, working with the POWs. And then afterwards, I had a chance to volunteer for the occupation in Japan. And so I went into Tokyo, and I was in the first group of enlisted women to go into Tokyo, and that was exciting. I never remember having any problems. You could always handle whatever came up. I never remember having real big problems about that. They seemed to be very responsive and glad to have us. I know with the POWs, they didn't even know there were women in the service, because it was really quite exciting, you know. What was the most exciting?
Or just one that stands out?
I have one that really stands out with me. When I was in Japan, I worked in the 361st Station Hospital, and I worked in the headquarters there. I wasn't working as a medic. And one day I was walking along the corridor, and there was a young Japanese girl, maybe she was 14 or so, but she had evidently was working in the hospital, and she was wearing on her sweater a chain and a medal. And I pulled out from under my uniform the very same type of medal on my chain, which I always wore. And her look was so exciting, and that was a warmest moment. It was one of those days when I was thinking, what am I doing here? You know, I was a little lonely. And that was the most exciting, warm moment for me. That was really stands out.
Do you remember what the medal was?
What it was?
What,
Yeah, it was a Blessed Mother. It was a Blessed Virgin, because a Catholic medal. Yeah. I don't. That was interesting because I don't know that it was painful. I didn't know enough about physical therapy as a technician, so I would really not want to do anything that I shouldn't be doing correctly. And I don't ever remember them complaining. I can't ever remember that. There was one fellow that I was working on, I can remember him, and he had tried to commit suicide, and we were massaging his wrists. And he was a joy to work with because he was so happy, and I was thinking to myself, I'm happy you didn't do the job. Just little things like that stand out. But most of them were pretty cheerful, happy, and I suppose that was natural for them. There was it was a nice atmosphere, the best food. And we went into what we always called a mess hall, was a dining room. What was ironic there was the men who were serving in the dining room were Germans who were our POWs. I always thought that was interesting. I was 24. I had been working in a hotel in downtown Boston in the accounting office. And so I saw that movie, that recruiting movie, and I said, you know what? I went home and told my mother and father, I'm joining the Army. Showing all how women were helping in hospitals, and exactly what I ended up doing. And I don't remember, except that it was a recruiting movie, and that's what really excited me, yeah. The first time I really wanted to do that. You became very proud of your uniform. And I think you had such a feeling of pride that you would not want to be seen doing anything that would disgrace the uniform. And that was our feeling, at least. That was mine.
I like how you said you became proud of it. So when you first got the uniform?
Oh, well, the first time you put on the uniform, you were so disheveled looking. It was really terrible. And we had knit caps that didn't do anything for anybody, and we had men's overcoats, and it wasn't something you'd really want to strut around in.
Told your parents. What did they say?
Well, that was funny. I think they felt sad about it, but they never said very much to me. But of course I was of age. And my parents were Irish immigrants, and it was unusual for a single girl, the way I was brought up, to leave home. We didn't do that. The only time you did leave home was either to join the convent or to get married. And so that was questionable, really. For a Catholic Irish girl to leave home was questionable because it simply wasn't done. No, they didn't go into an apartment by themselves when they got a job. You stayed home until you either decided what you wanted to do. Either you became a nun or you got married. Those were your options. Or you could stay single and you still live with your parents, and that had happened too. And that would go for the men, although the men would naturally have more freedom.
Anything other than seeing the movie that made you take such a different path?
I don't know. I don't know whether I had things in the back of my mind, because I think you finally get to a point where you say, I really should leave the nest and take off on my own. No, there weren't too many fellows to date, because when I went to high school, it was an all-girls high school, so I hadn't dated that much. And then as soon as I got out of high school, the guys were all gone. There was a draft, goodbye dear, I'll be back in a year, and then the war started, and so there were no young men around. Tell them about the travels on the ship that took 26 days to go from California to Japan, and how we stopped in Korea and let all these young fellows off. And seeing the Japanese, and you didn't have that feeling, you were almost built toward hating the enemy, hating the Japanese, hating the Germans. But then when you got over there, and you realized that these were a gentle, intelligent people, and who were doing tea ceremonies and all of this, and I thought, it made you think, really, that we're all the same type of people. We're all just people trying to survive. And when I saw how all the damage that was done to Japan, but that's war, so.
How did they receive you as an American woman?
I suppose it was a little bit surprising for them, but you have to remember that the Japanese were, we were an occupation group, and so there would be a shyness about really expressing themselves too much, I think. I remember I would get seasick on anything that moved. I got motion sickness, and I was so sick that, and all my buddies gathered around and brought me crackers and tea, put me up on the deck, and I said, just bury me at sea. I don't want to, somehow you survive. That was frightening for me, but nothing. I think I hated seeing men without their legs or in terrible, having wounds that wouldn't heal. It did bother me, yes, that part. I think so. I don't think I was aware, if I was making a difference, I don't think I was aware of it, because I didn't think of that angle of it.
Did you have time?
I just loved it, though. I loved being with the people and the patients, and I really enjoyed it. They were, but I think that most of them didn't have family there. I think they were from other parts of the country, and so,
Just getting it ripped
yeah.
apart.
And the ones who were allowed to go home had gone home and then come back in again. And so we didn't really have much contact with families, no. Oh yes, they had regular psychiatric care. But we weren't involved in that. Actually, they were very nice. We were lucky to have, because they wanted nothing but the best food for the POWs, and of course we were lucky enough to share with that. And our barracks were really lovely. They had recently built them, and so we had very pleasant area.
What type of privacy did you have?
Oh, you had total privacy, really, because you were in a separate building, not very far from the swimming pool, and no one could go beyond the first floor, and so, yeah, we had total privacy. It was very nice. You know, our attitude was different then, because we're a different generation, a different group, and I don't think it bothered us to have limits, because I think our thinking was really wrapped up in a song, "The whack is in back of you." We didn't mind the fact that we had to not have all the privileges that the men had, because that was our thinking at the time, I guess. And so as a result of that, we never really were restless because of it. Some women worked in the motor pool. Some women didn't want to get their hands that dirty. I would be one of them. And so you could actually choose at that time what you wanted to do. So you didn't feel limited that way. I know some were limited in that, pardon me, they couldn't fly. You know, you couldn't be pilots, and there were definite limits. And of course, a woman couldn't go into combat, and all that's changed now.
And how do you feel about, or what are your thoughts on how the roles have opened up?
The main difficulty I have is having women leave their children and go into the military. I just don't understand that. Part of it is my old thinking, I suppose, where I'm thinking that if you have children, take care of them at home, and that's where you should be. I think I did think about all the future possibilities, and we were opening new ground for women, and I was very proud of that. And later, when I went to, and I did think that there were many other fields that women could serve in, and hope that I would see that happen, and I did. When I went to the World War II Memorial, not the World War II Memorial, but the Women's Memorial in Washington, and I am one of the charter members in that group, I talked to women who came up to us and said, "Thank you. You paved the way." And that was the nicest feeling to hear that. These women that said, who were in these jobs and were lieutenants and captains, and they said, "You're the one, you women did it for us. You paved the way for us." And I thought that was beautiful. I think if a woman wants to put herself in that position and she chooses this, I think that's fine.
And you said a little while ago that you've changed your ideas over time.
Oh, I have about so many things.
What
Yeah.
are some of the ideas about the military that you had before that you've since changed? And from what to what?
I think I had the thinking, because there again, the way I grew up, that women have a place and men have a place, and that's okay if the men are ahead of us. But now I no longer think like that. I think it's wonderful that women can do so many things. And I like to think that we were part of changing that, whether consciously or unconsciously.
If your niece came up to you and said, "I'm thinking about joining the military," what would you tell her?
I would tell her, absolutely, beautiful, do it.
Would you give her any advice? If she says, "Okay, I am doing it, now that I'm doing it,"
Yeah.
what can you tell me?
I would probably say enjoy every moment. Don't let anything detract you. And be your own person. Remember who you are. I think sometimes when you're in and you're young and you've come from home and you haven't been away from home, it's hard to maintain your values and maybe remember who you are, because there's a lot of times when that can change. I think there are difficulties that you don't expect, and you have to remember, as I always said to myself, remember who you are, right?
Did you get that advice maybe from your mother?
Yeah, my father too, yeah. My father said, "Okay, you're leaving home, remember who you are now."
Generations of
Yeah.
advice. What were some of the situations where you felt that maybe you didn't remember who you were, or that?
Well, you put yourself in harm's way, I think, when you date someone that you don't really know and you get into a situation that you almost can't get out of. I think that would be one. You do meet dates that you are uneasy with, and you have to somehow again remember who you are.
Where did you go when you were in Florida?
Oh, you would meet them you would meet dates in any place, on the base. You would meet them at a dance, or they would invite you over to their areas.
Did you go on double dates, or?
Oh, we did, yes, we double dated, and that was nice. But
I guess it might have
There is a great deal of that sense of safety with a double date. But then there's a point, too, where you don't want a double date when you meet someone you really like. So I was working in a hospital in Japan, in the headquarters hospital, and you only dated other Americans. We didn't really have a chance to date Japanese, nor would we think of it, really, you know.
But you had a chance to date American men.
Oh, you did, yes, we did. It's really mainly friendship until, of course, I met my husband in Japan. Yeah. I met my husband at, one of the girls in my outfit married a fellow from his outfit, and they were both Italian from New York. They had a big wedding, and all of our billet was invited to the wedding. We had 450 women in that billet. So I met my husband there because he was in charge of the enlisted club, and he was the club manager as well as his regular job. This was his side job. And I met him there, and then we started dating, you know.
Did you dance at that party with your husband?
Oh, I did, yes.
And is that when you decided?
I really didn't. I just met him, and I thought he seemed nice. But then he called my billet and got my number and
you thought you'd go out
took
with
off
him?
from there. So we dated then, just exclusively, yeah.
And when were you engaged before you left the military, or?
Yes, I was, but he went home to Idaho, and I went home to Boston, to Massachusetts, and then we got married maybe 6 months later. Usually, mostly you'd stayed home, and we worked. It was a situation very similar in all the families, especially Irish-American families. You worked, you gave some money into the house, and then you brought your dates home, and the dates in the parlor, and or the living room now. But you had, most of the time it would be a disgrace if you said to a girlfriend, why don't we get an apartment and live someplace and have a little freedom? That would be something that would really be frowned on, and the neighbors and all the relatives wouldn't like it. And so you had the option to leave home. You either got married or went into the convent, or else you stayed home. Some stayed home forever.
What do they have the sort of don't ask, don't tell policy?
Oh, that didn't come until later.
Right,
See,
right,
during
that's
this, yeah, that didn't come until later. As a matter of fact, a number of them got discharged because it was discovered that they were lesbian.
And what was your thought on that?
I suppose we thought, well, that's how it is. You can't be and stay in. That was acceptable, and so.
And what are your thoughts about the current policy of don't ask, don't tell, or, so I guess it's really just
The
saying
later
don't.
policy, I thought that's okay too. That was part of my thinking changed on that, and because I met so many wonderful women, and I thought, if that's their lifestyle, it doesn't change how I feel about them as a friend or another woman. And so I thought that was all right. But I didn't always think that way.
What would you want your family and friends to know about what you learned in the military? It's like, this is what I learned in the military. You need to know this.
Even though we had a lot of rules and regulations, it was there that I learned to think for myself. And I really had a great deal of confidence in myself because I traveled alone, and I went went everywhere. I could go anywhere alone and be totally confident about myself. And I did learn that in the military.
Did you make close friendships?
Oh yes, I did. I had really good buddies.
Did you maintain those friendships?
Yes, I have only one now that I see.
What do you think is that creates that bond between the friends that you had in the military versus friends that you had since then?
Well, it's a totally different link. And especially, and also when I meet women who have been in the military and we start talking, we can laugh and talk about things that no one else would think was funny, and we have such a bond almost immediately. And of course you do with your closer friends who we're in too. We have groups that we belong to, the WAC group in Denver, and we call them. You would sit in bucket seats if there was room for you on a plane. And we went to Shanghai and Okinawa. Where else? Someplace. Yes, we could.
Do you have any fond memories, any specific memories of any of those trips?
I had a very funny thing happen to me. When I was in Shanghai, I have really big feet. They're narrow, but they're 10 and a half. And in an army boot, they looked pretty big. So we were standing waiting for an army shuttle bus to come, my two roommates and I. And I nudged them and I said, there's a woman coming down the street who was using a rocking motion. And I said she was probably one of those who had her feet bound. And so I thought that was so interesting. I started staring at her, and that woman stopped right in front of me and started to look at my feet. And then first, the Chinese are very curious, or oriented people. When something would be of interest to one person, then a small crowd gathered. I couldn't wait for that bus to come, and my roommates were just laughing so much because that woman was staring at my feet, and then everyone was staring at my feet. Well, army boots were pretty big. In Shanghai also, we saw the beginnings of the communist uprisings. We went up to Beijing, it was then, and that was pretty frightening, I thought.
Where were you in Beijing?
We went from Shanghai and took a train and went to Beijing, and then we got out and the crowds were gathering, and that was really quite frightening, and it was the movement had begun. In 47, I think it was.
So you were in a crowd?
We were in a crowd, yeah. We were the only Americans there.
Did they threaten you at all?
No, they didn't threaten you, but it was frightening because the crowd was getting angry, and we finally got a train out of there. But that was the only frightening area I can think of. That was enough. The interesting thing is that when it came to food, we really had the best. We had everything. We had wonderful mess hall cooks, and I don't think we really longed for any particular type of food. We could have the best. We could have turkey at Thanksgiving.
Do you have any regrets? Would you join the military again if you were to do it all over?
Oh, I would. Yes, I definitely would.
Could you add that in the...
I would definitely join the military if I were a young woman today. Yes, I think it's a wonderful experience. However, maybe I have illusions about it that are no longer present in this.
So do you think that women are valuable in the military?
Extremely valuable. Yes, I do. I think women can do whatever they want to do, wherever they want to do it now. And I'm proud of that.